The epigraph for this talk comes from a book by Rudolf Steiner, Knowledge of Higher Worlds, The Way of Initiation, published in 1908. There slumber in every human being faculties by means of which he can acquire for himself a knowledge of higher worlds. I begin with a bird, probably a crested ibis. They make their nests at the tops of trees on hills, usually overlooking their habitat. So they have a very high view of things, which may be why the ancient Egyptians borrowed this bird for their word ku. Ku was the immortal part, the radiant and shining being that lived on in the Sau, the intellect, will, and intentions of the deceased that transfigured death and ascended to the heavens to live with the gods or the imperishable stars. We find this especially in the Egyptian Book of the Dead from 1240 BCE. Although this is called the Egyptian Book of the Dead, really the actual name is the Book of Coming Forth or Going Forth by Day, which is a much more living title, and it was the original title. And in the Book of Coming Forth by Day, we find Book 12 is the Book of Making Perfect the Ku. Now here you see the Ku as representing what I'm about to read to you, as the holy cedar oil is placed on the forehead of the deceased. Now this is a funerary rite. All the works that are gathered in the Book of Coming Forth by Day are various prayers and rites for the deceased. So here the priest is saying, while he's applying this holy cedar oil to the forehead, make him to be a spirit soul, ku, through possession of you, and grant him to have the mastery over his body. Let his eyes be opened, and let all the spirit souls see him, and let them hear his name. Behold, Osiris Unus, the eye of Horus, the eye of the god, or the spiritual eye, hath been brought unto thee, for it hath been seized for thee, that it may be before thee. So the spirit soul, the ku of Osiris Unus, the deceased, is being initiated into a higher seeing, for entry into a higher world, as Rudolf Steiner described it in The Way of Initiation, to be received by other spirit souls. Now we go to Eleusis, Greece, in roughly the same period. This comes from 1500 BCE, and the Eleusinian Mysteries lasted for over 1,000 years. The Eleusinian Mysteries were the most famous in ancient Greece. They were a multi-day pilgrimage in which anyone might participate, including slaves, if they undertook the necessary purification and adhered to the strict code of silence. The Greek word mysteria thus signified an event defined by closing the lips, closing the eyes, and entering into complete and frightening darkness, followed by a brilliant light and disclosure of sacred objects. The entire purpose of the mystery rite, said Eleusis, was for the initiate to be inducted into a way of seeing, to apprehend a profoundly rapturous, overwhelming vision. In the Eleusinian rites, the seer achieved apopteia, an ability to see the inner God shining through the human being, to see that in all senses of the word, one has become one with divinity, that life isn't extinguished by death, that death is nothing to fear. The great Roman statesman and philosopher Cicero paid a great tribute to the Eleusinian Mysteries. For it appears to me that among the many exceptional and divine things your Athens has produced and contributed to human life, Nothing is better than those mysteries, for by means of them we have transformed from a rough and savage way of life to the state of humanity and have been civilized. Just as they are called initiations, so in actual fact we have learned from them the fundamentals of life and have grasped the basis, not only for living with joy, but also for dying with better hope. Now, I've created this chart to illustrate the similarity of the theme of initiation across these traditions. Mircea Eliade, a famous historian of religions of the last century, wrote that in philosophical terms, initiation is equivalent to a basic change in existential condition. The novice emerges from his ordeal endowed with a totally different being from that which he possessed before his initiation. He has become another. So in ancient Egypt, we see that the soul continued beyond death as a khu or spirit soul. In the Eleusinian mysteries, we see the enactment of death and rebirth. In the biblical traditions, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, the soul is immortal. In the near-death experiences, we see out-of-body experiences at the moment of death or near death. In ancient Egypt, we see becoming a higher being or being of light. In the Eleusinian mysteries, we have a more symbolic enactment, passage through darkness into a bright light as an epiphany. In the biblical traditions, again, both Old and New, in Isaiah and Matthew, appear the same sentence. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. And then in near-death experiences, we see passage through darkness into brilliant light and becoming light. In ancient Egypt, the deceased is reborn among the stars and gods. In the Eleusinian mysteries, the initiate emerges as a transformed person with a higher seeing. In the biblical traditions, for the initiates, that is the faithful, the promise of salvation and resurrection. The near-death initiation brings recognition of the soul, a higher self, and the loss of fear of death. Near-death experiences are also a form of initiation, however involuntary, as death itself is involuntary. The individual goes through the same phases more dramatically than any symbolic act of initiation. They begin with an actual death or near death. Most significantly, in Eliade's phrase, they become something other. So now I'd like to share with you a brief video I made of excerpts from the near-death experiences of these four people.
During childbirth, I had what is now called a near-death experience. I felt my soul rise up from my chest, through my head, and out through the top of my head.
We get to the emergency room, they get me on the gurney, and I just kind of casually take my attention up. And when I do that, instantly I'm in space. There was no tunnel, there was no anything. Everything was energy, everything felt like love.
And I had that awareness of, I'm dying. This is what it feels like. And at that moment, I popped out of my body. And the next thing I knew, I was on the ceiling looking down at myself and everyone around me. And I could see that there was no life left in my body.
If I've lost my mind, there's nothing I can do about it. And that was when I released. I just let go. And as I let go, the pleasurable sensations started there. Peace and tranquility and quiet and relaxation. And
the gray mist turned into an enormous, brilliant white light. And it was not a static light like a spotlight on the stage would be. It was a dynamic light. In some way, things were going on, power was going on in the light.
I quickly became aware of what people call the light. It went through me, and I was just a glowing orb of light. That's what I appeared to be. I had never felt more alive than when I was that glowing orb of light. I had never felt more aware of what was happening on this planet. In that state, I understood everything, the pain, the confusion, the identity stuff was gone.
And I was immediately in the white light. I started to feel the light more and feel the energy of what that was. And I immediately felt this overwhelming sense of unconditional love. Love like I have never felt.
And I somehow became aware of a point of white light. And I don't know how I knew that, but I knew I had to go toward the light. And as I did that, the light got bigger and more beautiful and more intense until it utterly absorbed me.
Till the light came toward me and drew me in also, and there was a point at which the light and I became one. The light consisted of a love that I cannot even describe, no matter how hard I try. There are no words to describe this kind of light, this kind of love.
Felt like every other aspect of being disembodied in that moment for me, everything felt like love. I felt like love. I felt like the system that I found myself in was just love, and I was just a part of it. But it also felt like it was everything. It felt like everything, every possibility, every past experience, everything.
Just made me feel like this is who I am. This is who I'm supposed to be. This is what my soul is all about. And as that was happening, I was also getting the sense that this white light that was all around me, that was taking such loving care of me, that I am that white light.
And I was the white light. It was infinite love. I mean, that's a big word, infinite. It was so perfect and complete. It was like wave after wave of cleansing white love.
And I lived with the experience for 23 years before Raymond Moody wrote his book. And I can't even describe to you what it was like to read that book. I cried my way all the way through it, copious tears. I knew for the first time that I was not the only person on earth to have had this experience, which he called the near-death experience.
What my experience showed me is that we tend to become the emotions versus just feeling them and letting them pass. It's like I became hate instead of just saying, oh, damn, that was hateful. But when you're already on edge and you already have these biases, you're ready. You're ready to jump as soon as the invitation. But my anger killed me. So if I was able to see what I was in a different way, instead of responding to it anger, responding to it with responsibility, responding to it with hope, I can help change that.
And a therapist that I was seeing, I remember her saying to me, she said, Jayne, when you talk, I can feel that white light. I can feel the qualities of that white light coming out of you. And she said, I bet you one day you're going to be able to fill a whole room with the energy of that white light.
I learned from my near-death experiences how to be in the present moment, how to be now. That's really where I find my peace, right? But when I am in the present moment, I'm there.
These four people reflect the common experience of millions of people who have had near-death experiences. They also met beings of light, although I wasn't able to include that. Even back in 1992, there was an estimate, a Gallup poll, that 13 million Americans had experienced an NDE. By 2001, 4% of over 2,000 people surveyed reported having experienced an NDE. And in 2023, research on the incidence of near-death experiences for patients admitted to intensive care units for at least 7 days reveals that 15% reported having experienced an NDE. It's only the medical advances in the 1960s, only with those advances, that physicians were able to resuscitate patients after cardiac arrest. In 1969, Pim van Lommel, a young Dutch cardiologist, heard his first account of a near-death experience from a revived patient, although the term did not enter the mainstream until Raymond Moody's 1975 book, Life After Life, that Jayne Smith wept through from beginning to end. This led him to a lifelong study of near-death experiences, along with the important work of other physician scientists, including Raymond Moody, Bruce Grayson, and Kenneth Ring, who established the field of near-death studies. In 1981, Bruce Grayson and Kenneth Ring founded IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. A most extraordinary fact emerged that dramatically called into question the standard view that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of, was created by, the physical brain. This was a shock to the scientific system, and still is. But there was a greater shock to a common view of mortality, the idea that our own consciousness continues on following the death of our bodies. Even religious people who had accepted the idea as a tenet of faith were still not prepared for such actual accounts. Mainstream scientists rejected them, mainstream religions rejected them, even friends and families rejected them. But now we have these openings that are coming even from science, or maybe especially from science. From a premier center of consciousness studies, that's the Arizona Center for Consciousness Studies, comes this symposium for this summer, entitled Neuroscience Needs a Revolution to Understand Consciousness. And in the description, we view consciousness as the most important unsolved problem in science and philosophy today. Despite extraordinary advances in physics, chemistry, biology, and details about the brain, consciousness, the essential aspect of human existence, remains a mystery. Now, a question I had as I began to watch many near-death experiences was, where are these people going, in a manner of speaking, because they're having this similar experience? So from physics, Bernard Carr, the professor of mathematics and astronomy at Queen Mary University in London, takes the view that a feature of the next paradigm must be an expansion of physics to accommodate mind and consciousness. He writes, they are amalgamated in what I term a universal structure, which can be interpreted as a higher dimensional psychophysical information space. This space has a hierarchical structure and includes both the physical world at the lowest level and the complete range of mental worlds from normal to paranormal to transpersonal at the higher levels. The assumption that mental phenomena require a communal space is tantamount to positing some form of universal mind, which is controversial but central to the universal structure proposal. I end with a beautiful quote, one of my favorites, from Richard Tarnas's The Great Initiation, which was published in Ion's Review in 1998. The entire path of Western civilization has taken humankind and the planet on a trajectory of initiation. I believe the West, humankind, has entered into the most critical stages of the death-rebirth mystery. We are undergoing this rite of passage with virtually no guidance from wise elders, because the wise elders are themselves caught up in the same crisis. This initiation is so epical, so global, so unprecedented, and so all-encompassing. It is bigger than all of us. We are all entering into something new, and we cannot really know where it's headed. Thank you. The Crested Ibis and I thank you.